For 11 weeks, one road stood between England and Scotland. One road, one plateau, and the men who refused to let it die. 23rd of December, 1962, 11:45 at night. The thermometer outside the Ministry of Transport depot at Penrith, Westmoreland, reads -7 degrees Celsius and falling. Foreman driver Arthur Moss pulls on a second pair of woolen gloves, exhales a slow cloud of breath into the frozen air, and climbs into the cab of a Bedford RL Snowplow, engine number 4 in a convoy of 3 machines. He does not know it yet, but he will not sleep in a warm bed for the next 4 days. The route north is already dying, and the only thing keeping it alive is the convoy he's about to lead into the dark. The winter of 1962 to 63 is the coldest Britain has experienced since 1740. That statistic sounds academic until you understand what it means on a road that climbs to 1,395 feet above sea level across open moorland, with no shelter, no windbreaks, and a prevailing westerly that funnels directly off the Lake District fells carrying snow horizontally at 40 miles per hour. Shap Fell. 9 miles of exposed plateau on the old A6 between Kendal and Penrith. For 2 centuries it has been the primary overland artery connecting England's industrial heartland to Scotland. Coaches broke axles here, horses died here, and in the winter of 1963 the Ministry of Transport is about to discover exactly how close a modern nation can come to losing its own spine. The snow begins in earnest on Boxing Day. What starts as a moderate fall across the north of England transforms within 18 hours into something altogether different. Driven by winds gusting to 51 miles per hour, the snow does not accumulate evenly. It drifts. On Shap Fell, the open geometry of the plateau, treeless, flat-topped, exposed on every compass bearing, acts like a funnel. Drifts form not gradually but suddenly, building to 8 and 10 feet within a single hour in the same locations where a plough has just passed. By the morning of the 27th, there are lorries stranded at 3 separate points on the summit stretch. Their drivers have been in their cabs for 11 hours. The temperature outside is -12. This is the context Arthur Moss and his crews inherit. Not a single dramatic emergency to be resolved, but an unrelenting war of attrition against a landscape that is actively hostile and a weather system that shows no sign of exhaustion. The Ministry of Transport Northern Road Division allocates 3 Bedford RL snowplows, 2 Leyland Hippo gritters, and a Ford Thames recovery truck to the Shap operation. It sounds adequate on paper. On the ground, it is barely sufficient for 1 continuous pass every 90 minutes, and the drifts close back within the hour. The A6 over Shap is not merely a convenience. By January 1963, with the M6 motorway still years from completion at this latitude, it is the primary freight and passenger road corridor through the northern Pennine Gap. Meat from Scottish abattoirs, coal for Cumberland power stations, mail, medical supplies. Arthur Moss joined the Ministry of Transport Road Maintenance Division in 1951, after 4 years as a Royal Engineers driver in post-war Germany. He's 43 years old in the winter of 1963, experienced enough to know that the standard operating procedure for snowplow convoys, 2 passes per shift, return to depot for fuel and crew rest, will not hold in these conditions. Arthur Moss joined the Ministry of Transport Road Maintenance Division in 1951, after 4 years as a Royal Engineers driver in post-war Germany. He's 43 years old in the winter of 1963, experienced enough to know that the standard operating procedure for snowplow convoys, 2 passes per shift, return to depot for fuel and crew rest, will not hold in these conditions. Within 48 hours of the Boxing Day snowfall, he makes a decision that his depot supervisor in Penrith will later describe in a written report as outside established protocol but operationally correct. Moss restructures the convoy schedule to continuous operation. No return to depot, fuel brought to a lay-by at the southern foot of the fell. Crew changeovers performed roadside, in the dark, in temperatures that have fallen to -15 by the end of December. The mechanics of a snowplow convoy on Shap in these conditions are worth understanding precisely, because they reveal how narrow the margin of success actually is. The lead plough, Moss's Bedford, carries a front-mounted hydraulic blade set at a 45-degree angle pushing snow to the nearside verge. The second machine follows 60 yards behind, catching the overflow and widening the cleared lane to allow two-way traffic. The third acts as a rear guard, its blade angled opposite to prevent snow rolling back from the verge face. In theory, this creates a cleared corridor approximately 14 feet wide, enough for a laden lorry with care. In practice, on the exposed sections between the Jungle Cafe lay-by and the summit crest. Crosswinds fill the corridor from the offside within minutes of each pass. The crews are not clearing snow, they are holding it back. There is a difference, and it matters enormously for understanding what these men endure. The nights are the worst. Visibility on the summit plateau drops to near zero in drifting conditions. The Bedford's headlights illuminate nothing useful. A wall of white moving horizontally, reflective in the beam, disorienting in the way that it erases all depth perception and horizon reference. Moss navigates by the metal roadside marker posts, painted black and white, set every 50 yards along the S6's verge. In heavy drift, they disappear entirely. When that happens, the technique passed down through Ministry of Transport, winter operations training is to stop, send a man forward on foot with a 6-foot probe rod to find the next marker, then advance. In a blizzard at 2 o'clock in the morning at minus 13 degrees Celsius, on an exposed plateau 900 feet above the Eden Valley, walking forward with a probe rod is an act that requires a very specific category of unremarkable courage, the kind that does not appear in official records because the men performing it do not consider it remarkable. Driver Second Class Kenneth Hale, 26 years old, from Shap village itself, is the man most often sent forward with the probe on Moss's convoy. He grew up on the fell. He knows its moods in the way that only people who live adjacent to something genuinely dangerous can know it. In later interviews recorded by the Cumberland and Westmoreland Herald, Hale described the sensation of walking into a full Shap blizzard at night as like stepping into a room where someone has turned the walls off. No horizon, no sky, no ground. Just the rod in his hands and the chain attached to his belt running back to the plough's front tow hook. A safeguard against losing orientation entirely and walking off the road into the open fell. The convoy holds. Through the last days of December and into the first week of January 1963, Arthur Moss's 3-vehicle operation keeps the A6 open when virtually every other exposed road in northern England is closed. The A66 over Stainmore, closed. The S685 through Kirkby Stephen, closed. The S6 over Shap remains a single-lane, intermittently passable corridor, held open by 3 Bedford RLs and crews working in conditions that the official Ministry of Transport weatherlog describes, with characteristic bureaucratic restraint, as severely challenging. The lorry drivers who use the route in these weeks understand what they are driving through. Accounts collected by local historians describe convoy procedures that emerge organically among the freight drivers themselves, waiting at the Jungle Cafe on the southern approach until Moss's ploughs have made a pass, then following in groups of 4 or 5, hazard lights on, maintaining 50-yard separation, never stopping unless absolutely forced to, because a stationary lorry on the summit in those winds will drift over in under 20 minutes. One driver, Ernest Tyson of Carlisle, describes arriving at the summit crest on the 3rd of January behind a plough pass and seeing the cleared road ahead of him close over, visibly, like water filling a channel, within the time it took him to change gear. He pressed the accelerator and drove through what was already a 2-foot drift closing across the carriageway. He made it. The driver behind him did not and spent 4 hours waiting for the next plough pass. The big freeze does not relent in January, it intensifies. The 16th of January brings the worst conditions of the entire winter, a sustained northerly airflow drawing Arctic air directly across the fell, wind speeds at the Shap Summit anemometer recording gusts of 63 miles per hour, visibility down to 30 yards. The Ministry of Transport issues an order to suspend snowplow operations temporarily. The risk to crews is assessed as too high. Moss parks the convoy at the summit lay-by, engines running to prevent freezing, and waits. The road closes in 4 hours, when the wind drops marginally, not to safe conditions but to marginally less dangerous conditions. He restarts the operation without waiting for the all-clear from Penrith. The route reopens. The official record notes the closure as lasting 4 hours and 17 minutes. It does not note that the man responsible for ending it acted on his own authority. By February, the operation has acquired a rhythm that is almost surreal in its sustained intensity. The crews know every drift formation on the 9 miles of Summit Road by character and location. The diagonal drift that forms in the cutting south of the summit marker, always to the near side, always rebuilding from the right. The long, flat drift across the open section near Wasdale Head Junction that Hale has nicknamed the floor because it fills the road smoothly, invisibly, in a way that looks passable until you are in it. The turbulence drift behind the old Shepherd's Wall at Highboroughdale that can stack to 12 feet in a single gusting hour, and requires the recovery truck and both secondary ploughs working together to brake. This is the intelligence that the men carry in their bodies, not written down, not communicated upward to the Ministry of Transport planning offices in London, but operationally critical in a way that no survey or meteorological model can replicate. Winter road operations at this level are not an engineering problem. They are a knowledge problem, and the knowledge lives in men like Moss and Hale, accumulated through cold and exhaustion, and the particular attentiveness that comes from knowing the consequences of inattention. The freeze finally breaks in the first week of March 1963. Temperatures rise above freezing on the 7th. By the 10th, the snow on the fell is retreating, revealing the surface damage, frost heave cracks in the tarmac, subsidence at verge edges, damage to the marker posts, equipment buried under compacted snow at the summit lay-by. The Ministry of Transport Northern Division compiles its post-winter operations report. It records the A6 over Shap as having remained nominally open throughout the worst winter in over 2 centuries, a distinction shared by virtually no other exposed upland route in northern England. Arthur Moss receives a letter of commendation from the regional director. Kenneth Hale receives nothing in writing, though his supervisor notes in an internal memo that he performed duties considerably in excess of his grade. Both men return to routine road maintenance work by April. The motorway that will eventually bypass Shap Fell entirely, the M6 completed to this section in 1970, is already under survey. Within a decade, the old S6 over the summit will carry a fraction of its former traffic. The struggle of the winter of 1963 will become, for most people, simply a story old men tell. But for 11 weeks, in the dark, on a plateau where the wind comes from the north with nothing between it and the Arctic, 3 Bedford RLs and the men who drove them held the last route north. Not because anyone ordered them to beyond the point of reasonable human endurance, not because the official procedures made it possible, but because Arthur Moss looked at the road closing behind him on a December night and decided, with the particular stubbornness of men who understand consequences clearly, that it was not going to close, and it didn't.